So when I say basic Buddhism, what I mean is the section of Buddhist teachings that has to do with ethical behavior. 戒,戒律 is precepts, ethics, and the discipline of how to live or how to behave in a way that leads us towards freedom. So in these collections, they give general instructions on speech and how to speak. And what is the main principle behind speech or right speech according to the Buddhist teaching? You'll find that it's called wholesome speech. Wholesome speech. The word in Chinese is shan. Behavior is categorized into wholesome and unwholesome, generally speaking. And what does that mean? Wholesome here doesn't mean morally good or bad, right or wrong. It's not some moral judgment on the person for being good or bad if they speak in a certain way. But wholesome and unwholesome simply means wholesome is speech and behavior that is in the direction of freedom from suffering. Unwholesome speech or unwholesome behavior is behavior that leads us in the direction of suffering, that leads us in the direction of creating more trouble for ourselves and others. That's the simple approach to it. So, speech that's wholesome doesn't fuel craving. Speech that's wholesome doesn't fuel aversion or attachment to views. Wholesome speech lessens craving, aversion, and attachment to views. And in general, it avoids harming. It avoids causing suffering for ourselves or others. And on the flip side, it also should promote well being. It should promote a freedom from craving, aversion, and rigid views. So, in the Eightfold Noble Path, which I think most of you have heard, that's like the basic formula for Buddhist practice, right? The Eightfold Path. In that, we have right speech, right? Right speech means right in the direction of freedom, in the opposite direction of suffering. And there's also right mindfulness, which in combination with speech and right mindfulness um, together bring us more close to wisdom, closer to speaking and communicating in a way that is free and skillful. So if we look at right speech, what is it exactly? So according to Buddhist precepts, have you folks heard of the 5 precepts? 5戒, right? It's another basic formula for ethical behavior. Not killing, stealing, lying, having sexual misconduct, which is just harmful, troublesome sexual behavior, and not taking intoxicants. There's actually only one that refers to speech, right? Not lying, which seems very simple. In the 5 precepts, there's only one precept or guideline for speech. However, if we look more deeply into the precepts, we find something that's called the 10 wholesome deeds. Chinese is 10善. What's unique about the 10 wholesome deeds? One is that they're common to most schools of Buddhism, Mahayana, or any tradition. And they're included in the Mahayana Bodhisattva precepts, the Pusajie, which are the ethical guidelines for someone who, as I mentioned before, practices and wants to live this path not only for themselves, but for the well being of everyone. That's what we call a bodhisattva, or a being that's directed their life on awakening. These 10 wholesome deeds also focus on abstaining from doing harm, right? So they're reminders not to do something harmful, and they overlap with the 5 precepts. But what's unique is that regarding speech, there's four. There's 4 guidelines. Not only not lying, but there's also not speaking divisively, not lying, not speaking divisively, not speaking maliciously, and then not speaking frivolously. The Chinese is 不妄语，不两舌，不恶口，不绮语, right? So I'd like to spend a little time talking about these because they're simple, but at the same time, they can help us reflect on how we speak and to bring more awareness to, is our speech in daily life really leading us towards freedom and peace of mind? Or is our speech actually causing trouble for ourselves and others in ways that maybe we're not so aware? So I'd like to spend some time looking at um, right speech from the perspective of precepts, and then in a little bit look at mindful speech. So, not lying, that seems pretty clear, right? We all know what it means to not lie, which means basically to tell the truth, to tell what we think and know is true, and to avoid from telling people the opposite. You know, to say we saw something when we didn't see it, or say we heard something when we didn't hear it. It seems simple, but it's important to know the principle. Why is there an ethical guideline in Buddhism that says don't lie? How could lying create suffering? Maybe sometimes we think, well, lying's not so bad. I'm not killing anybody. I'm not hitting anybody, but maybe I can get a little benefit from something if I just, tell not the whole truth or tell mostly not the truth and maybe a little bit of truth. It's not going to hurt anybody, but I'll benefit. If it seems like it's not going to hurt anybody, but will benefit, is there a problem there? At first, it may be like, no, that's why I'm lying. But if we look closer, even if it doesn't directly and immediately hurt someone, if we're lying just to gain benefit, there's probably craving in our mind. We're probably speaking because we're driven by craving and we just want something really bad. And if we speak when our mind has craving in it, then what happens? We just fuel that craving. That speech is reinforcing that attitude of craving and then acting on trying to get it. So it's just a little bit of money, nobody will miss it. They won't miss it. They have millions of dollars. I'll just take a little bit because I need it and because I could use it. Seems like no problem. Especially if we're stealing from someone who has billions of dollars. We just steal a couple thousand. It's like, come on, this person has billions of dollars. A couple thousand's nothing. You may have seen stories of investors who did that. They conned their clients by just stealing a little bit of money and a little bit every once in a while. The client had no idea. And maybe in the beginning it seemed harmless, but what happened in the end? The investor is spending a long time in prison because of it. And the person who was conned, who was tricked out of their money, that's of course very upsetting and can cause a lot of problems. So all of these precepts, all of these guidelines for ethical behavior are designed to protect us from acting out based on craving or based on anger or even based on some form of ideology. Like maybe in our mind it's okay to steal from some people, but not other people. So since it's okay to steal from the rich and not from the poor, we'll just steal from the rich and give to the poor. It sounds just from a certain perspective, but if we just look at the state of mind of the person doing that action, that rigid view can also lead to an accumulation of rigid views to the point where in the beginning it was okay to steal from the rich. Maybe in the end they believe it's okay to kill the rich so that you could take everything and give it to the poor. Ideologies start with small ideas, but eventually can accumulate into huge philosophies, which can bring about a lot of suffering and disaster. So it sounds pretty heavy all of a sudden, starting with just not lying. But I'm trying to point out how, as it said, a little drop of water can eventually fill an ocean. So precepts are trying to help us have an awareness of um, how craving, aversion, and attachments can drive our behavior and to remind us to not act from that. The next one, not to speak divisively, um, basically just means to not intentionally speak to create conflict. Um, on a small scale, maybe we've done this all before. Maybe we've all done this before. Just think you have two friends, and one friend said something that maybe wasn't so nice. And we go to the second friend and we say, "Hey, do you remember what she said to you last night?" You do, right? Can you believe she said that? I can't believe she said that. I mean, are you going to take that from her? You're just going to let her say that? What are you going to do? I think you should say something back. I think you should text in the group. I think you should let everyone see what you say to her, right? Have we been in this position where we're in between two parties, but because we like drama, we instigate, and we're actually creating division between our friends. And sometimes it's unconscious, right? Sometimes we want our friend to stand up for themselves, but we end up interfering in a way that's actually creating conflict. I'm seeing some expressions like maybe you remember doing that, or maybe you've seen it and you've seen the outcome. This divisive speaking happens all the time. And we could see it on a micro scale with ourselves and our friends and family. And we can see it in the media on a macro scale between countries, speaking in ways that's instigating conflict. So the precepts remind us to not do that, to avoid creating disaster through divisive speech. And then there's malicious speech, which seems obviously harmful. Malicious speech is like, you know, saying something very clearly harmful to someone, like, saying, I hope you die, which, yeah, you may laugh, but I had a client who his mother would often say that to him, which was kind of sad. He was a young guy. He was struggling with a lot of mental health issues, and it was difficult for the family, difficult for the parents, very difficult for the mother. And out of frustration, she would say, I hope you die. And, it really hurt him. He was trying his best, and it really hurt him to hear that. Maybe he also said it to her, I'm not sure. So maybe it was fair. They both said it. But that kind of speech, just directly aggressive and malicious, it only fuels our anger. We only get into a habit of saying it more easily, right? If we say, I hope you die, which is pretty heavy, we probably don't mean it. I'm sure the mom didn't mean that, but it became easier and easier to say, right? And then it may escalate into something else and become worse and worse. So again, this is a reminder not to speak out of ill will and to refrain from that. The last one, or the last of these four of the 10 wholesome deeds, is not speaking frivolously. And this it takes a little bit of research to understand what does this mean in this context. The Chinese is qi yu, not to speak frivolously. In one context, it could mean not to speak with flowery speech. So not to speak and just to try to impress people, to use fancy big words to impress people. And we may think, well, what's the problem with that? Isn't it good to impress people sometimes? But what kind of attitude is that if we're always trying to impress people? Are we craving attention? Or are we trying to please people? Right? In Chinese, it's called 讨好人. Speaking in a way that's just like really just trying to butter someone up or please them, make them feel good. Why? Because oftentimes we want people to like us, which is a kind of craving, isn't it? We just want attention. We want love so bad that we speak in ways which it's not only flowery, but it may be insincere. We're not saying something we really believe in. We're just saying, "Oh wow, you're such an amazing person." And maybe we have to think a bit. Okay, I said that. Now what should I say next? Oh, because you did this and it's just so amazing. Oh, it's just a wonderful talk. Wonderful job. If it's sincere, that's no problem because it's just an expression of our admiration. But, is it possible that we speak just to please because we crave a positive reaction? We want them to like us. Sarcasm is another version of qiyu or frivolous speech. And being sarcastic, right? It's like we're intentionally saying the opposite of the truth, but just to be funny. So, right, if it's like we're in a group of people, we're talking about somebody else, and we say, "Oh yeah, everyone loves that guy," but what we mean is like everyone hates that guy. But we use this sort of playful, humorous, but not sincere speech. It seems like it's not hurting anyone. But what happens if we're sarcastic more and more? Eventually, people won't believe us. They won't even know if we're being sincere or not. And they'll doubt us. And we ourselves may even start to doubt ourselves. What do we believe if we're just saying all this that's not true, but we're just trying to get a laugh? Or maybe we're trying to hide something. Sarcasm, the kind of humor of sarcasm, can sometimes be a way to hide from showing our true feelings or expressing our true thoughts. Qiyu, or frivolous speech, can also be gossip, which we all know can be really fun, but again, can lead to all sorts of trouble. The more we gossip, the more we spread things that could be true that may not be true. We just spread more trouble. So, speaking frivolously and all these subtleties of it reminds us to really be aware of when we're speaking. What is this intention behind our speech? Is it sincere, or is there some ulterior motive, a kind of craving attention, or avoiding people not liking us, right? So these four, not speaking falsely, basically not lying, not speaking divisively, not speaking maliciously, and not speaking frivolously. These are all reminders to abstain from speech that causes harm. And at the same time, it can help us reflect on ourselves and reflect on the intention behind speech. But if you've noticed, this is all it's just talking about what not to do. Are there any Buddhist teachings that talk about what we could do that's beneficial and wholesome?